Okay, well, I was meant to do this last month when it snowed so heavily that they canceled it. But I had everything in a nice IPython notebook, and then I got here and discovered that my browser is throwing errors and it will not bring up an IPython notebook. So I have quickly transferred everything into separate files, and we'll see how that works. Okay, so there are lots of ways to represent things as a string in Python. I'm looking for a job, and so I've subtly sprinkled references to that through here. Jerry, you got to...
Yeah, Phil, can you make it a little bit bigger, please?
Oh, geez. I thought 14 point was enough. Okay, that's sort of the limit. There are lots of ways to represent things in Python. Now, canonically, that's how you represent a Unicode character. This happens to be a, I think it's a Turkish E, but it's something that looks like an E from a random Unicode page, and if you do it in IPython notebook, it actually looks like an E, as you can see there. However, if you do it in a Cygwin terminal, it's not happy. But what we have here, what we show here is we've got the str function that allows you to represent a variable as a string, and the repr function, which allows you to represent the variable as something that the interpreter can consume. We've also got the ASCII call, which represents it as something that is all ASCII characters, and so we'll represent this Unicode escape as the Unicode escape. And these are implemented, for those who don't know, by these double underscore or dunder functions, string and repr. So the repr n is just another way of calling n, or we can call n string or pli repr. And we get things like that. So that's not formatting. That's just representing a string as itself. In this case, we take a phone number that's represented as a string, bunch of digits, and simplest thing to do to quote format it is string concatenation. And so you concatenate these things together. You use slicing to pull out characters from the phone number, and it comes out looking nice. But this is not really what we want. It's somewhat hard to read. The string slicing is a little difficult. So we have the percent formatting. Now this is using percent formatting with a dictionary, something that most people don't use too much, but is very nice. You have the, oops. You have the percent and a parentheses that gives the name of the item from the dictionary, and you can then use percent formatting and it will pull these things out of the dictionary. And surprise, looks like that. Okay, now back I believe in 2.6 we got the format function on a string. And the format function on a string, you pass in curly braced numbers, possibly followed by a colon and a format specification, and it then pulls these out in order. So that you get the formatted string that is then printed. And something 2.7 offered was it dropped the need to number the curly braces. It now takes them just in order. If you're going to supply them in order, which you normally do, you just need the curly braces. And now we get to what's new. No, this is new in 2.7. We added a new dunder format. And whenever the class is formatted, dunder format is called. So if we have a phone number class here, we can move the slicing of the phone number into that class. And so now I just say, there's my string, there's my class with that, and now I can just put in curly braces and it will call the class to do the formatting. Let's see. And so you see the formatting is now, it inserts the slash and the dash. Now that was in 2.7. Now we come to the, what's really new in 3.6. We have what's an F string. And an F string is a string which has an F in front of it. Also called a formatting string, but you can see where they got the name. And now we don't have to say .format and give it a list of variables. We just refer directly to the variable inside the curly brace. And it uses standard Python search for variables and substitutes the variables into the string and runs it. Now, what's really interesting about this is where the variable is in the curly string can be any legal Python expression. So instead of n, we can have n plus 1. And you notice I've got a 03D here, and the time number here is formatted with 3 characters with leading zeros. Now this stuff at the top is what we've had before. What you get when it executes a line with a format is a string variable. So if I print out the type, it's going to print out that it's a string. So, and I can pass this around like I could any other string. There we see it's a class string. And now, because this is one of the rules is that within a formatted string, you cannot have a backslash. So you cannot explicitly put \n in the string that you're going to print out in an F string. But there are a couple ways around that. One is to put your backslash variable inside, or your backslash string inside a variable. And then, like in this example, we use the variable right here and do a join. Or we can put the backslash outside the string by using the rule that a string that stops and is followed by white space, spaces or carriage returns, does not interrupt the string. So we can combine F strings and regular strings, and because this is any legal Python expression, we can do a join here and get a multi-line output. By passing in a list. We can even have lambdas in here. Lambda has to be enclosed within the F string, within the curly brace. The lambda expression has to be enclosed within parentheses, and then after it is the value that's passed to lambda. And there we are, surprise answer. Now, lambdas in Python are somewhat suspect these days. Generally, it's clearer and more easily understood. You can have things like comments in them if you have an internal function. And so you can call that internal function within your F string. And so I have a get square function. I define an internal function and then use that within the F string to print out some stuff. And there we go, 3 squared is 9, and 45 million squared is 2 quadrillion something. I bet you didn't know that. Now, we haven't talked too much about the format specifier. If you put a colon within a F string, or within the formatted value, what follows is passed to the dunder format as a second parameter, first parameter being the object itself. So we can do stuff like specify the width and precision of a decimal number. And within a curly brace, you can have nested curly braces. So I can have width and precision being variables in my environment that are used to specify the format of another variable. Oops. And there we have it. We've got 5 wide and 2 characters after the decimal. Talk a little bit about abuse of this. Within this second curly brace, this is the format specification here that's passed is passed to the dunder format of the class of value. And so you can do stuff like have this be a JSON string, value being a class that you define, and it uses that JSON string to do something very unusual. You can also use it to specify HTML templating. And I had a couple examples of that, sort of abuse. And as you would imagine, for something with 13 examples, it didn't make it when I copied it onto my thumb drive to bring it down here. So that's the end of the talk. Hopefully you'll find f-strings useful, and I think they're a lot more clearer and have begun using them throughout my code.
All right, do we have any questions for Phil?
Will you make the notebook available with the example of strings with HTML templates?
Yes, I'll be putting that out on the Meet Hub.
So the notebook will be available?
So the notebook will be put out there.
Awesome.
Yes, Rob.
Yeah, it looks like it's an insecurity hole if you have, if you can put arbitrary expressions in there and store an user string, that's a string, one sort of spacing and protections are for that.
Didn't quite. Could you talk a little louder?
If you were storing user data, user supplied data in f strings, and then when you print it out, it'll execute any arbitrary Python expression in this curly braces. It looks like a giant security hole.
Oh, well, yeah, it's if you're using it for something on a server where you are pushing this out, like in HTML, this would definitely count as a security hole that you need to close up, because you don't send unescaped user strings back.
There's no extra protection.
Yes, reference to the Bobby Tables cartoon.
These things are only for string literals, right?
Yes, these are for string literals. But to get that literal, you can execute almost anything in there.
Take one more question.
One more question?
Is there a way to force the string to be evaluated without using print?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I had one example in here.
Or rather, maybe the other way, is there a way to store the template in that string?
Can you store the templated f string without evaluating it? You can pass it to exec and get the string back. So you can triple quote it and then exec it at some later point. Yeah, T?
Not looking at the security aspect, but as far as clean code or Python code is concerned, like putting lambdas or this concatenation looks like a slippery slope. So where is the line where a string is cool versus is
Okay, the question is f string Pythonic? And yes, I would say that this example that's up on the screen is Pythonic, that if you start abusing it, it leads you down, yes, it definitely leads you down a slippery slope to very obfuscated code. I would not really recommend it. In my fooling around, it does lead to much fatter code if you try to execute stuff. Just defining a dunder format method on a random class reminds me of defining a getter and a setter in Java. Okay, thank you. Oh,
Just,
here.
just in like simple terms, like the F string, what can it be used for?
What it's real use for is something like this print statement I have up on the screen, where you just are referring to a variable and you want to print it out, or you want to stick it into another string. It's very clean, very simple. You're not calling a dot format and putting the variable in there twice, essentially. So what I've found is that it's a lot more readable.
All right, thank you, Phil.